Have you ever noticed that as we get older, people start treating us differently? Maybe friends don't visit as often, family seems distant, or conversations feel a little shorter than they used to. It's easy to blame it on time, busy schedules, or even assume that people just don't care as much anymore. But what if, without realizing it, you were doing things that slowly push others away? Aging is a gift, but it also comes with changes. Not just physical ones, but shifts in our habits, mindset, and the way we interact with the world. The tricky part? Some of these changes happen so gradually that we don't even notice them. But the people around us do, and if we're not careful, they can create an invisible wall between us and the people we love. I want you to imagine something for a moment. Think back to a time when you truly enjoyed someone's company. Maybe it was an old friend, a spouse, or even just a casual conversation with a neighbor. Now, imagine that connection slowly fading away, but you're not sure why. What if it had nothing to do with them being too busy, but everything to do with small, unnoticed behaviors on your part? The good news is, once you recognize these habits, you can change them. And today, we're going to talk about 12 things that might be pushing people away without you even knowing it. Let's start with something that might surprise you: negativity. Nobody enjoys being around constant complaints, even when they're valid. Life isn't always easy, and aging comes with challenges. Aches, pains, technology that seems designed to confuse us, and, let's be honest, a world that moves too fast. But have you ever noticed how some older folks seem to radiate warmth and wisdom, while others seem to repel people without meaning to? The difference is attitude. When conversations are filled with complaints about health, the news, kids these days, or how things used to be better, it creates an energy that people want to escape. That doesn't mean you have to pretend everything is perfect, but there's a difference between sharing and dwelling. Try this. The next time you catch yourself about to voice a complaint, follow it up with something positive. Instead of saying, "My back is killing me," you could say, "My back's acting up today, but I found a stretch that helps." That small shift in tone makes a world of difference. And speaking of tone, let's talk about another habit that can unknowingly push people away: interrupting or dominating conversations. This one is tricky because it often comes from a good place. You have wisdom, experience, and stories to share. Why not tell them? But have you ever been in a conversation where someone kept cutting in with their own stories, not really listening, just waiting for their turn to talk? It doesn't feel great, does it? Sometimes, without realizing it, we do the same thing. Try this. The next time you're in a conversation, pause for a moment before responding. Instead of jumping in with a similar story or correcting someone's memory, ask a question. Something like, "That's interesting. What happened next?" You'd be amazed at how much deeper your connections become when people feel truly heard. Now, let's talk about something we often overlook: personal hygiene and grooming. This is a sensitive one, but it's important. As we age, our senses change. We might not notice certain smells, or our eyesight might not catch those little details we once did. Maybe grooming feels like more of a chore than it used to, but here's the thing: no one wants to bring it up, so instead they slowly start keeping their distance. It's never about perfection, but small things: fresh breath, clean clothes, trimmed nails. Send a message: "I respect myself and I respect your presence." A simple routine can make all the difference. And if some tasks have become difficult, there's no shame in getting help. A fresh haircut, a dental checkup, or even switching to easier-to-use hygiene products. The goal isn't vanity. It's about feeling good in your own skin and making others feel comfortable in your presence. All right, we've covered a few big ones so far: negativity, dominating conversations, and personal hygiene. But there's still more to uncover, and coming up next, we'll dive into another habit that can unknowingly push people away, even when it comes from a place of love. Let's keep going. Have you ever noticed how, over time, some friendships and family connections just seem to fade away? It's not always because people are too busy or because they don't care. Sometimes it's the little things we don't even realize we're doing, that create distance. We've already talked about negativity, dominating conversations, and personal hygiene, but there's another behavior that can quietly push people away, even when it comes from a place of love: giving unsolicited advice. Now, let's be honest. When you've lived 7, 8, or even 9 decades, you've learned a thing or two, and when you see someone making a mistake, especially your children or grandchildren, it's natural to want to step in and share some wisdom. But here's the thing. Most people don't like being told what to do, especially if they didn't ask for advice. Picture this. You're talking to your adult child and they mention they're struggling with something at work. Before they can finish, you jump in with, well, what you need to do is. The intention is good. You want to help, but sometimes people just want to be heard. They're not looking for a solution, just someone to listen. And when advice is given too often, especially when it's not asked for, it can come across as controlling or dismissive. A simple shift in approach can make a huge difference. Instead of offering advice right away, try asking, do you want my thoughts on that? Or, would it help if I shared what worked for me? This small question gives the other person a choice. If they say yes, they'll be more open to listening. If they say no, it means they just needed a sounding board, not a solution. Either way, they'll appreciate your presence more because they'll feel heard, not lectured. Another thing that can unknowingly create distance? Talking too much about the past. Now, don't get me wrong, sharing memories is one of the greatest joys of aging. A well-told story from the good old days can be entertaining, nostalgic, and even educational. But if every conversation turns into, well, back in my day, or things were so much better when, it can start to feel like a one-way trip down memory lane that others can't relate to. Think of it this way. If someone spent most of a conversation talking about things you had no connection to, would you feel included or left out? Younger people may love hearing stories, but they also want to talk about their lives, their experiences, and the world they live in now. Instead of always reminiscing, try bridging the gap. For example, if you're telling a story about how things used to be, tie it to something relevant today. You know, when I was your age, we didn't have smartphones, but we had our own ways of keeping in touch. How do you think people will stay connected 50 years from now? This way, the conversation stays engaging and includes everyone. Now let's talk about a habit that slowly isolates people over time: resisting change. Technology, social norms, music, communication, everything changes. And sometimes it's tempting to just say, I don't do that, or that's not for me. But when we reject new things completely, we unintentionally cut ourselves off from experiences and conversations that keep us connected. Think about how much the world has changed in the last 50 years. Imagine if you had refused to use a microwave when they first came out, or ignored every new advancement in medicine. Staying open to change doesn't mean you have to love every new trend, but a willingness to try and understand makes all the difference. Let's say your grandchild is obsessed with social media. Instead of dismissing it with "kids these days are glued to their phones," ask them to show you how it works. Maybe even try it yourself. You don't have to become a social media expert, but showing interest in what matters to others keeps you included in their world. And speaking of staying included, here's another sneaky way people push others away: refusing help. There's a fine line between independence and isolation. Many people take pride in doing things themselves, and that's a great quality. But when people offer help and we always refuse, they eventually stop offering. It's not because they don't want to help, but because they don't want to make us uncomfortable. The next time someone offers assistance, whether it's carrying groceries, setting up a new gadget, or just lending a hand, try saying, "I'd love the help, thank you." Accepting support doesn't make you weak. In fact, it does the opposite. It strengthens connections. People want to feel useful, and allowing them to help you makes them feel valued too. So far, we've covered some major habits that can unknowingly create distance: unsolicited advice, dwelling too much on the past, resisting change, and refusing help. But we're not done yet. There's another behavior, one that can be the hardest to admit, but has the biggest impact on relationships. And that's what we'll talk about next. There's a strange thing that happens as we age. Sometimes, we don't even realize how much we've changed. And I don't mean wrinkles or gray hair. I mean the little things in our behavior, our attitude, and the way we interact with others. We've already talked about unsolicited advice, dwelling too much on the past, resisting change, and refusing help. But now, we need to talk about something that might be the hardest to admit: becoming emotionally distant. Life has a way of teaching us hard lessons. Over the years, we go through heartbreak, disappointments, and losses, and sometimes, without meaning to, we start closing ourselves off. Maybe we don't express our emotions as much as we used to. Maybe we avoid deep conversations because we don't want to feel vulnerable. Maybe we've been hurt before, so we've built a wall around our hearts without even realizing it. But here's the truth: people connect through emotions. When we stop sharing how we feel, when we stop expressing warmth, it can make us seem distant, even cold. And that can make loved ones feel like they're losing us, even when we're right there. Think about the people in your life: friends, family, even casual acquaintances. When was the last time you told someone, "I appreciate you," or "I love you"? When was the last time you gave a hug just because? These small gestures keep relationships strong. Don't let life's hardships make you numb. Let people know they matter to you. A little warmth goes a long way. Now, let's talk about another subtle behavior that can push people away: being overly critical. This one is tough because it usually comes from a place of experience. When you've lived a long life, you've seen mistakes, learned lessons, and developed strong opinions. But constantly pointing out flaws, whether it's in people, trends, or even small things like how someone sets the table, can make interactions feel like a test instead of a conversation. Have you ever spent time with someone who always found something wrong? It's exhausting, isn't it? No one wants to feel like they're walking on eggshells. That's not to say you should never voice your opinion. But before making a critical comment, ask yourself, is this important? Or am I just used to things being done a certain way? If it's not truly necessary, let it go. Life is too short to focus on the small imperfections. And speaking of time being short, here's something that might be happening without you realizing it: losing your sense of humor. Laughter keeps us young, it brings people together, but sometimes as we get older, life starts feeling too serious. We focus on aches and pains, responsibilities, and the state of the world, and somewhere along the way we stop laughing as much as we used to. Think about the last time you had a deep belly laugh, the kind that made your stomach hurt, the kind that reminded you what it feels like to be alive. If you can't remember, it might be time to bring that lightheartedness back. Watch a funny movie, spend time with someone who makes you smile, or, even better, be the person who makes others laugh. A good sense of humor is like a magnet. It draws people in. Now, there's one last thing we need to talk about, and it might be the most important of all: becoming isolated. It happens slowly. Maybe you stop going out as much. Maybe phone calls become less frequent. Maybe you tell yourself that you don't want to bother people. But here's what really happens. The less you reach out, the more people assume you want to be left alone. And before you know it, days turn into weeks, and weeks turn into months without meaningful connection. Loneliness is one of the biggest struggles in old age, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you notice yourself pulling back, push yourself to reconnect. Call a friend, join a group, say yes to invitations even when you don't feel like it. Human connection is not just important, it's essential. We've covered a lot today. Some of these habits are easy to change, while others take more effort. But the good news is, awareness is the first step. The small changes you make today can have a big impact on your relationships, your happiness, and your overall quality of life. And here's something to remember: it's never too late to reconnect, to change, to grow. No matter how many years you've lived, there is always room for more joy, more love, and more meaningful connections. Now, before we wrap up, I know you might have some questions. Maybe you're wondering, where do I start? Or, what if I've already pushed people away? Let's go over some practical ways to turn things around right now. At this point, you might be wondering, where do I even start? Maybe you recognize some of these habits in yourself. Maybe you're thinking about moments when you unintentionally pushed people away. The good news is, no matter how much time has passed, you can always rebuild connections. Let's go over some simple, realistic ways to turn things around. First, start small. You don't need to overhaul your entire personality overnight. Pick one habit, just one, that you think might be creating distance, and focus on improving it. Maybe you've caught yourself being overly critical or offering too much advice. Instead of trying to change everything at once, just practice holding back a little. Pause before you speak and ask yourself, is this helpful? Or is this just my opinion? The more aware you become, the easier it gets. Now, let's talk about reaching out. If you've been feeling isolated, waiting for someone else to make the first move might not work. People assume that if you're quiet, it's because you want to be left alone. But a simple message, "Hey, I was thinking about you today," can open the door. If it's been a long time, don't worry about how much time has passed. Just start the conversation. You'll be surprised how many people are happy to hear from you. And what about family? If your kids or grandkids aren't calling or visiting as much, it's easy to feel hurt. But before assuming they don't care, ask yourself, have I made it easy for them to connect with me? Sometimes younger generations avoid certain conversations because they don't want to be lectured or feel judged. Try making your interactions light and enjoyable. Instead of asking, "Why don't you call more?" try, "I love hearing from you, tell me something fun about your day." People naturally gravitate toward where they feel welcome. Now let's tackle a common question. What if I've already pushed people away? Maybe you've had moments where you were too negative, too critical, or emotionally distant. Maybe you've noticed that people have stopped inviting you to things, or your relationships feel strained. Here's what you can do: own it. If you recognize a pattern, there's nothing wrong with saying, "I realize I've been hard to talk to lately, and I want to change that." A little honesty and humility go a long way. And what about help? Many seniors struggle with accepting assistance because they don't want to feel like a burden. But think about it. When someone asks for your advice or help, do you ever feel burdened? Of course not. You feel valued. That's exactly how others feel when they help you. Allowing someone to lend a hand isn't taking from them, it's actually giving them the gift of feeling needed. Next time someone offers, instead of saying, "I don't want to bother you," try saying, "I'd really appreciate that." It strengthens your bond instead of creating distance. Another question people often ask is, how do I stay socially active if I don't have a big circle of friends? The truth is, friendship can happen at any age. It's never too late to build new connections, but it does require effort. The key is to put yourself in places where connections naturally happen. Try joining a local group, volunteering, or even just going to the same coffee shop regularly. Familiarity breeds connection, and the more people see you, the easier it is to start conversations. And for those who are hesitant about modern technology, here's something to think about. Social media isn't just for kids. If you can't see family or friends in person as often as you'd like, learning to use a smartphone, video calls, or even social apps can keep you connected. Don't let technology intimidate you. There are always people willing to help you learn. Finally, let's address the elephant in the room. What if you feel like it's too late? It's never too late. No matter how many years have passed, no matter how many relationships have faded, you always have the power to rebuild, reconnect, and bring more joy into your life. It starts with small steps, choosing kindness, embracing humor, letting go of grudges, and making the effort to be present in the lives of others. We've covered a lot, and I hope this has given you not just insight, but hope. Because the truth is, you are not meant to go through this life alone. Aging doesn't have to mean isolation, and it certainly doesn't mean losing the ability to connect deeply with the people around you. Now, before we wrap up, let's talk about how you can take action, starting today. So here we are. We've talked about the habits that can push people away without you even realizing it. And we've gone over real, practical ways to rebuild connections. Now the question is, what will you do with this information? Because the truth is, nothing changes unless you decide to change it. You could walk away from this video and say, "That was interesting," but if you don't take action, nothing will be different tomorrow. Or you could pick just one small thing, just one, and start making a shift today. Maybe you decide to make your next conversation more positive. Maybe you reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Maybe you stop resisting help and let others feel useful. It doesn't have to be a big step, just a step, because when you make the effort, people notice. And when people notice, connections start to strengthen again. And here's something important to remember: you are not alone. No matter how distant relationships may feel, no matter how long it's been since you felt truly connected, there are always people who care. And if you're willing to make the first move, you'll be amazed at how quickly things can turn around. Now, I want to challenge you, right now. Think of one person you care about. Someone you may have lost touch with, someone you want to reconnect with, or even someone you see all the time but feel distant from. Reach out to them today. Send a message, make a call, even just drop a small comment to show you're thinking of them. You don't have to wait for a perfect moment. The perfect moment is right now. And if this message resonated with you, if you found something valuable in this video, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps more people find this message, and you never know who might need to hear it today. Better yet, share it with someone who might need it. Maybe it's a friend, a sibling, or even a child who's watching their own parent go through this stage of life. Let's help each other grow, connect, and age with grace, wisdom, and strong relationships. And before you go, make sure you subscribe, because in our next video, we're going to talk about something just as important: how to keep your mind sharp and your memory strong as you age. If you've ever walked into a room and forgotten why you were there, you won't want to miss it. But for now, I want to leave you with this. Aging is not about losing things. It's about gaining perspective. And the best way to grow older is not to retreat from life, but to lean into it. To embrace the people around you. To stay open. To keep laughing. To keep learning. Because life isn't over until it's over. And you have more to give, more to experience, and more to enjoy. So go out there and live it, and I'll see you in the next video.